What if I told you that the ancestors left us 9 doors into the spirit world, hidden pathways, thresholds into the unseen, where humans can step beyond the veil of the visible and walk in the company of spirits? These doors were not imagined as symbols in a myth or abstract metaphors to inspire reflection. They were lived realities opened through trance, dreams, rituals, sacred groves, and the voices of mediums who carried messages from another realm. But what exactly are these doors? Can they be opened by anyone? Or are they reserved for those chosen by the spirits? And when one steps through them, what lies on the other side? African spirituality does not present itself as a rigid dogma carved in stone. It does not dictate one single road into the sacred. Instead, it offers a map, a constellation of pathways, each one designed for a different kind of traveler, a different state of being. These 9 doors were understood as entrances into a cosmic architecture where the world of the living and the world of the ancestors are not separate but intertwined. The question has never been whether the spirit world exists. The question has always been how to enter it, how to return from it, and how to carry its wisdom back into ordinary life. Imagine a people who saw no boundary between the dream and the waking world. For them, the night was not a time of rest, but a classroom, a battlefield, and a temple. Imagine communities where rhythm and drumming could open the body like a key, unlocking a hidden passage. Imagine sacred groves where the trees themselves stood as guardians to the threshold of another dimension, and rituals where sacrifice and song created a bridge between the visible and the invisible. These were not metaphors. They were technologies of spirit, refined and practiced for centuries. The 9 doors of the ancestors form a mystical map, one that explains how humans have always crossed between realms. To speak of them is to speak of a wisdom system that treated the unseen not as superstition but as reality. In these traditions, entering the spirit world was not an escape from life, but a way of deepening it. It was a practice of listening, of alignment, and of returning with knowledge that could heal, protect, and guide the community. And so, as we stand before these doors, the invitation remains. Will we dare to enter? To grasp the mystery of the 9 doors of the ancestors, we must first understand the philosophy that frames them. In African thought, the world was never split neatly into spirit on one side and matter on the other. Existence was a single fabric, woven with threads both visible and invisible, tangible and intangible. A tree was not just bark and leaves, it was also the dwelling place of spirit. A river was not only water and current, it was the body of a guardian, a channel of ancestral presence. Human beings themselves were understood as layered beings, flesh interwoven with spirit, waking consciousness interlaced with dreams. This worldview meant that to step into the unseen was not to enter an alien reality, but to pass through a door already embedded within the ordinary. Because of this interwoven vision of existence, access to the unseen was never considered accidental. It was structured, intentional, and guided by laws as precise as those that govern the flow of rivers or the rise of the sun. The ancestors spoke of 9 doors not as poetic metaphors, but as distinct passages that one could prepare for, enter, and return from with clarity. These doors were not open to everyone at every moment. They required attention, discipline, and respect. To stumble through unprepared was to risk madness, misfortune, or spiritual imbalance. To enter with guidance, however, was to step into a realm of profound wisdom, where truths about destiny, justice, and healing could be revealed. This is why communities across Africa invested so much care in the custodians of these doors. Mediums, priests, healers, and diviners were trained not just in ritual knowledge but in the moral responsibility of carrying messages from the unseen. The doors were never treated lightly. They were thresholds that demanded humility. To cross them was to encounter forces older and more powerful than any individual, and only those who approached with sincerity were permitted to bring back insights that could guide their people. The preparation to approach these doors was often as important as the entry itself. Fasting, ritual cleansing, offerings, and prayers were common ways of readying the body and spirit. Just as one would not walk into the dwelling of a king without proper conduct, no one entered the dwelling of the spirits without respect. Each door had its own requirements, its own guardians, and its own taboos. Some demanded silence, others demanded song. Some could only be opened in the solitude of the forest, while others appeared in the intimacy of dreams. The map of the 9 doors was not a casual teaching. It was a sacred manual for walking carefully between worlds. What emerges from this philosophy is a profound sense of structure. The unseen was not chaos, nor was it an undifferentiated blur of mystical impressions. It was ordered, layered, and accessible through precise pathways. The 9 doors served as markers of this order, reminding seeker that the spiritual realm had its own geography. Just as one needs rivers, roads, and stars to navigate the physical world, one needed doors, rituals, and guidance to navigate the spiritual one. Without this structure, a traveler could become lost, mistaking illusion for truth or wandering endlessly without return. Yet the doors were also invitations. They spoke of a universe that was open, not closed. The spirit world was not locked away from human beings but woven into their very lives. Every dream, every ritual, every sacred place was a potential threshold, reminding people that the ancestors were not distant figures trapped in the past. They were living presences, ready to guide, warn, and protect, if only the living knew how to listen. The 9 doors taught that reality itself was porous, that every moment carried the possibility of communion with the unseen. At its heart, the philosophy of the 9 doors reveals an understanding of existence as layered, structured, and relational. Spirit and matter were never opposed. They were companions in the same dance. To open a door was to deepen that relationship, to step consciously into the truth that had always been there. And so, the 9 doors of the ancestors stand not just as mystical pathways, but as reminders. Reminders that the unseen world is never far, that it is bound to us, and that to engage it requires both reverence and courage. Among the 9 doors of the ancestors, few are as universal and intimate as the door of dreams. Every night, as the body rests, the spirit loosens its ties to waking reality and enters a vast field where ancestors, deities, and unseen forces speak in symbols. In African traditions, dreams were never dismissed as random illusions of the mind. They were understood as messages, warnings, and revelations, an entire language of spirit designed to guide the living. To close one's ears to dreams was to ignore a doorway that opened freely to all. Across the continent, the role of dreams has been central to how communities engaged with the unseen. In the Yoruba tradition, dreams were often read as conversations with Orun, the spiritual dimension, and messages from ancestors or Orisha. And if a priest might be consulted to interpret a troubling dream, unraveling its patterns to reveal hidden meanings about health, destiny, or danger. Among the Zulu, dreams of ancestors visiting in familiar forms were treated with the highest seriousness, often calling for rituals of appeasement or offerings to acknowledge the guidance received. The Igbo too spoke of dreams as journeys into the other world, where one could encounter not only ancestors but also hostile forces, requiring spiritual protection upon waking. In many cultures, dreams served as maps, pointing the way toward action in waking life. A dream of a flooded river might be a warning against a journey. A dream of fire could signal a conflict within the community. A dream of a departed ancestor offering food was not simply nostalgia. It was a sign of blessing, a reminder that the living remained under the watch of the dead. These were not vague superstitions, but trusted forms of intelligence, shaping decisions about farming, marriage, war, and governance. Dreams also revealed the hidden battles that shaped life. Warriors who were known to receive instructions in dreams, warned of ambushes, or guided to victory by ancestral figures. Healers dreamed of the herbs they should gather, sometimes being shown exact plants or chants to use in curing illnesses. Mediums received initiation through dreams, called by spirits who visited them until they accepted their vocation. In this way, the dream world was not just symbolic. It was a functional reality where the unseen prepared, instructed, and empowered the living. What makes the door of dreams extraordinary is its accessibility. Unlike other doors that require rituals, sacred groves, or trained mediums, every person enters the dream world. Yet the difference lay in awareness. Those who cultivated respect for dreams, keeping them in memory and seeking interpretation, walked through this door consciously. Those who dismissed them wandered aimlessly in the spirit world, never realizing that guidance had been offered. To honor a dream was to honor the ancestors, to acknowledge that they continued to speak even when the sun had set. Thus, the door of dreams stands as a reminder that the unseen is never far. It comes to us each night weaving messages into our sleep. For the ancestors, this was not a trivial phenomenon, but one of the most direct pathways into the spirit world. A daily proof that the boundary between the living and the unseen is porous. To dream was to travel, to be taught, and sometimes to be tested. And to awaken with remembrance was to return carrying treasures from the other side. If dreams open the door during sleep, trance and possession open it while awake. In African spiritual traditions, the body itself could become a vessel, a living doorway through which ancestors and spirits stepped into the world of the living. This was not seen as madness or loss of control, but as one of the most sacred ways in which the invisible made itself visible. Mediums, trained or chosen, stood at the threshold between realms, allowing voices from beyond to speak, heal, warn, and guide entire communities. Trance was the controlled entry into this realm. Unlike dreams, which come uninvited, trance was pursued through deliberate practice. Mediums prepared themselves with rituals, fasting, and cleansing to become receptive vessels. When the moment came, they entered altered states of consciousness, a suspension between ordinary awareness and the spirit world. In this state, the human voice might change, the body might move in unfamiliar rhythms, and knowledge far beyond the medium's personal experience would pour forth. To witness it was to see the unseen world take flesh, reminding everyone that ancestors and spirits were not abstract, they were present. The role of drumming, chanting, and rhythm in this process cannot be overstated. Across the continent, trance was rarely achieved in silence. The drum was not just an instrument, it was a key. Its steady beat mirrored the heartbeat, pulling the listener deeper into alignment with the pulse of the universe. As the tempo increased, it carried the spirit into states where ordinary boundaries dissolved. Chanting too layered sound upon sound, building vibrations that altered perception and invited possession. In some traditions, entire communities participated, their collective voices creating a current strong enough to open the door together. Spirit possessions often followed. Here, a deity, ancestor, or guiding force would ride the medium, borrowing their body to speak directly. This was not considered frightening but honorable. To be chosen as a vessel was proof of spiritual favor, and the messages given in possession carried immense weight. Communities gathered around the possessed medium, listening to the words of the spirit with reverence. Advice on justice, health, harvests, or conflicts flowed, and decisions were made not only by human reason, but by the counsel of the unseen. The door of trance and possession also revealed a deeper truth about African spirituality. The body was not an obstacle to spirit, but its gateway. In many Western traditions, the body was often seen as something to overcome in order to reach higher states. But in Africa, the body was honored as the bridge itself. Through rhythm, breath, and movement, the body opened and the spirit entered. Possession was not erasure, but union. A reminder that human beings were designed to be in dialogue with the unseen. This door also carried rules and responsibilities. A medium could not misuse their gift or invent false messages without consequence. The community watched closely, and the spirits themselves were believed to punish deception. To open oneself to possession was to accept accountability, for the medium carried not only messages but also the moral duty to preserve truth. Preparation, humility, and purity of intent were required. Without these, trance could turn dangerous, leaving the person vulnerable to harmful forces. For the people, however, the benefits of this door far outweighed the risks. Through trance and possession, justice was restored, lost items were found, sickness was diagnosed, and conflicts were settled. The ancestors spoke not through books or doctrines, but through living bodies. This immediacy made the unseen real in a way no philosophy could. To sit before a possessed medium was to sit before the ancestors themselves. Thus, the door of trance and possession stands as one of the most dramatic thresholds into the spirit world. It reminds us that the invisible is not unreachable, and that through rhythm, song, and surrender, humans can become the vessels of cosmic voices. When the drumbeat rises and the chant swells, the air itself changes. The ancestor steps forward, and for a moment, the distance between the worlds disappears. This is the power of trance, to turn the human body into a living bridge where spirit walks again among the living. Among the 9 doors of the ancestors, few are as mysterious and awe-inspiring as the sacred groves. Across Africa, forests were never viewed as empty wilderness. They were recognized as liminal spaces, thresholds where the human world met the realm of spirit. Within the dense canopies and echoing silences, people sensed the presence of powers older than themselves, spirits of the land, guardians of rivers, and the ancestors whose voices could still be heard in the rustling leaves. To step into a sacred grove was to step into a place where the ordinary rules of the village no longer applied. These groves were treated as living temples, sanctuaries where no stone walls were needed. The trees themselves were pillars, the canopy a roof, the earth the altar. Here the ancestors dwelled, and here deities were believed to watch over their people. Unlike shrines built in villages which were accessible in daily life, the groves demanded intentional pilgrimage. They were not places one entered casually. The air carried a weight of reverence, reminding all who walked there that they were guests in a domain not entirely their own. The rituals of entry were as important as the groves themselves. Before approaching, seekers often fasted or bathed in rivers to cleanse themselves. Offerings of kola nuts, libations of palm wine, or the blood of a sacrificed animal might be placed at the threshold. Prayers were spoken aloud, asking permission to enter and declaring respect for the spirits within. Only then could one step across the invisible boundary. To rush in without preparation was to risk offense. An offense could bring sickness, misfortune, or even death. The grove was alive and it demanded honor. Once inside, the grove became a stage for profound encounters. Diviners sought visions there. Priests communed with ancestors, and entire communities gathered for festivals that renewed their bond with the spirit world. Shrines were often hidden within these groves. Small altars, carved stones, or earthen mounds that marked points of power. Some groves were reserved only for certain rituals, such as initiation ceremonies where the young were introduced to the mysteries of adulthood under the watch of spirits. In these moments, the grove was not only a temple but also a classroom, a place where human beings were initiated into the deeper patterns of existence. The power of sacred groves was reinforced by taboos. Many could not be caught, hunted, or farmed. To remove wood from a sacred grove was to invite spiritual retaliation. Even words spoken too loudly were considered disrespectful. These taboos preserved the sanctity of the groves, but also ensured their survival as ecological havens. Long before the modern idea of conservation, African traditions had already woven respect for forests into spiritual law. The result was that groves endured as both sacred and ecological sanctuaries, alive with mystery and life. Through sacred groves and shrines, the ancestors created a door into the spirit world that was both physical and metaphysical. Anyone could see the trees, feel the earth, and walk the paths, but only those who entered with reverence could experience the deeper reality hidden there. These spaces reminded people that the world was layered, that the ancestors remained near, and that communion with spirit required humility. To walk into a sacred grove was to step out of the ordinary and into eternity, carried by the whispering voices of those who came before. Among the 9 doors of the ancestors, the door of ritual and sacrifice is perhaps the most deliberate and structured. It is the door that makes clear that relationship with the unseen is not casual but contractual. In African traditions, rituals were not performed as empty ceremonies. They were agreements, binding exchanges between human beings and the spirit world. To pour libation, to offer food, to lay down the life of an animal, these were not acts of destruction, but gestures of recognition. They acknowledge that life moves in cycles, that nothing is given without something in return, and that harmony between the visible and invisible requires active participation. Rituals were understood as contracts, where every action carried weight and consequence. To neglect a ritual was to break an agreement, to dishonor ancestors who had kept the covenant of protection. But to perform them with sincerity was to renew the bond, ensuring the blessings flowed and dangers were kept at bay. This logic was woven into every level of life. Birth, marriage, harvest, hunting, and warfare all required ritual acknowledgement. Each moment of transition demanded a contract with the unseen, for each was a reminder that human existence unfolded within a larger order that included ancestors, spirits, and deities. Sacrifice stood at the center of these contracts, but it was never about destruction for its own sake. A goat offered at a shrine, a libation of palm wine poured into the earth, or a meal shared at a festival was not about loss, but about exchange. The animal or substance was transferred into the unseen, carrying with it the intentions of the people, gratitude, supplication, or atonement. In this way, sacrifice became a bridge. It reminded both sides of their responsibilities, the living to honor the unseen and the unseen to guard, guide, and provide for the living. At a deeper level, rituals functioned as technologies of alignment. Just as a tool can tune an instrument or adjust a machine, rituals tuned the human community to the rhythm of the cosmos. The chants spoken, the gestures performed, the offerings placed, all were precise actions meant to bring harmony. Misalignment in life, sickness, conflict, misfortune, was often seen as evidence that a contract had been broken or that alignment had been lost. Rituals restored the balance, bringing people back into rhythm with the ancestors and with the laws of the universe. This door was also one of discipline and seriousness. Not everyone could perform every ritual. Some required the authority of priests, others demanded the experience of elders. The knowledge of how to conduct rituals was carefully guarded, for to make mistakes was to risk invoking the wrong forces or leaving the contract incomplete. But when done correctly, rituals became some of the most powerful expressions of human connection with the unseen, shaping reality in tangible ways. The door of ritual and sacrifice then is not a door of fear, but of responsibility. It reveals that life is built upon relationships between humans and nature, between the living and the ancestors, between the visible and the invisible. To enter this door is to recognize that nothing exists in isolation. Every gift is part of a cycle, every offering part of an exchange, every ritual a renewal of the covenant that sustains existence itself. Through ritual, human beings align with the heartbeat of the cosmos, ensuring that they walk not alone, but in harmony with forces far greater than themselves. If ritual and sacrifice create contracts with the unseen, then divination is the language through which those contracts are interpreted. The ancestors taught that the spirit world is constantly speaking, yet humans often struggle to hear its voice clearly. Divination became the structured dialogue, a way of translating the whispers of the unseen into guidance that communities could understand and apply. It was not guesswork or random chance, but a disciplined system, refined over centuries, that turned signs, symbols, and patterns into messages of wisdom. Across Africa, the forms of divination were diverse, yet united by their purpose. In some traditions, bones or cowrie shells were cast upon the earth, their positions read like sentences written by the ancestors. In others, sacred chains were tossed, each arrangement of links carrying coded meaning. Oracles spoke through trained mediums, while visions were induced through rituals and substances designed to open perception. Among the Yoruba, the system of Ifa divination became one of the most sophisticated, using verses memorized by priests to interpret the patterns of sacred palm nuts. Among the Dinka and Shona, bones were used, each piece representing a different element of life, from family to enemies to ancestral presence. Every method carried its own grammar, its own rules, its own doorway into the unseen. The diviner stood as the interpreter of these hidden doors. He or she was not merely a fortune teller, but a custodian of balance, a mediator between realms. When someone approached the diviner, they sought not entertainment, but clarity. Why sickness lingered in the body, why misfortune had struck a household, or whether the ancestors were displeased. The diviner's task was to open the door of divination and bring back answers that were both truthful and practical. This role required immense training, moral discipline, and spiritual readiness, for a careless interpretation could mislead an entire community. Divination was, above all, a dialogue. The seeker posed questions, the spirits responded through symbols, and the diviner translated the conversation. It was not one-sided, nor was it arbitrary. The same patterns of shells or bones could mean different things depending on the context, the person, and the energy present. In this way, divination was dynamic, alive, and deeply relational. It showed that the unseen world was not distant but responsive, engaged in a constant back and forth with the living. Through this door, communities found direction in moments of uncertainty. Kings consulted diviners before war, farmers before planting, families before marriage. When justice could not be settled by human courts, divination was sought to reveal truth. Even when dreams or omens had already spoken, divination confirmed their meaning. It was the system of verification, ensuring that people did not act blindly but in alignment with cosmic order. What made divination so profound was its ability to bridge the rational and the mystical. The casting of shells followed strict procedures. The verses of Ifa were memorized with precision, and the interpretation adhered to patterns passed down through generations. Yet the result was guidance that felt deeply personal, as if the ancestors themselves had spoken directly to the seeker. In this way, divination embodied the very heart of African spirituality, the union of order and mystery, structure and spirit. The door of divination remains one of the most enduring pathways into the unseen. It teaches that life is not left to chance, and that the ancestors continue to converse with their descendants. Through bones, shells, oracles, and symbols, the unseen world opens its mouth, and through the diviner's wisdom, the living world listens. This is not magic in the sense of illusion, but communication. An ancient dialogue that continues to remind humanity that the spirit world is always near, always watching, always ready to guide. Among the 9 doors of the ancestors, none is more immediate and tangible than the door of mediumship. While dreams and divination rely on symbols and ritual also require preparation, mediumship brings the unseen into the present moment through living bodies. A medium becomes a living door, a vessel through which spirits pass, allowing ancestors to borrow voices, gestures, and even faces to communicate directly with the living. To witness this was to stand at the meeting point of 2 worlds, where the line between human and spirit blurred before the eyes of the community. The process of possession through mediumship was not seen as strange or frightening, but as a sacred honor. When an ancestor or spirit chose a medium, it was proof that the bond between the living and the unseen remained strong. During ceremonies, the medium might tremble, their voice shift, or their movements change as the spirit entered. What followed was not performance but dialogue, a moment where the community heard the ancestors speak in the first person. Advice, warnings, blessings, or judgments flowed through the medium, and the words were received with the gravity of cosmic truth. In these moments, the ancestors did not feel distant. They were palpably near. Communities did not take such moments lightly. To ensure authenticity, mediums were closely observed, and the messages were tested by results. A true medium spoke with authority that resonated in the heart of listeners and brought resolution to problems that had no earthly explanation. If a sick person was healed after following instructions, or if a conflict ended in peace through the guidance given, the medium's role was affirmed. False mediums who sought attention or gain were quickly exposed, for the ancestors were believed to punish deception with illness, disgrace, or madness. Because of this, mediums occupied a respected but weighty position within society. They were honored as chosen bridges, yet carried the burden of responsibility. Their lives were often marked by discipline, as they were expected to keep themselves pure and ready for spirit intervention. Communities supported them, recognizing that through these living doors, the wisdom of the ancestors remained alive and active. The door of mediumship reminds us that the ancestors were never silent shadows locked in memory. They remained participants in the affairs of the living, using chosen voices to guide, protect, and correct. Through mediums, the spirit world was not an abstract idea but a living presence, stepping into the circle of the community to remind everyone that the bond between the living and the dead could never be broken. Among the 9 doors of the ancestors, the most inevitable and mysterious is the door of death. To the ancestors, however, death was not viewed as an ending but as transformation. a crossing from one state of being into another. Life was understood as a cycle, not a straight line, and death was simply the threshold that returned the soul to the larger rhythm of existence. To die was to pass into the realm of the ancestors, to step through a door that every human being must one day walk through. This passage was not traveled alone. The ancestors were believed to serve as guides waiting at the threshold to welcome the departing soul. Just as a child entering the world is received by family, so too was the dying person received by their spiritual lineage. Rituals of burial, mourning, and remembrance were not only acts of respect for the dead, but also affirmations that the journey was safe, guided, and complete. The community ensured that the departing soul had everything it needed: prayers, offerings, and ancestral acknowledgement to navigate the unseen and join the circle of those who came before. For the living, this door was not only about loss, but also about continuity. Death created ancestors, and ancestors did not vanish. They became guardians, messengers, and protectors. The final passage thus transformed grief into relationship, as families learned to call upon their departed for guidance and strength. Death was feared, yes, but it was also honored as the necessary passage into a higher form of presence. Rebirth was the other face of this same door. Many traditions across Africa taught that souls could return, re-entering the visible world through birth. A child might be recognized as the reincarnation of a grandparent or elder, carrying familiar traits, mannerisms, or destinies. The door of death was thus not a wall, but a revolving passage, linking generations in a cycle of continuity. Through it, a community renewed itself, carrying forward the wisdom and spirit of those who had gone before. In this way, death was never truly separation. It was entry into a new stage of existence, one that deepened the bonds between the living and the unseen. To understand this door is to see life as endless rhythm, where every ending is a beginning, and every passing soul becomes a torchbearer guiding the way for those yet to come. The 9 doors of the ancestors form more than a sequence of mystical practices. They are a map of life itself, a chart that shows how the living may walk in constant dialogue with the unseen. From the intimacy of dreams to the discipline of rituals, from the awe of sacred groves to the final passage of death and rebirth. The doors remind us that existence is not bound by what our eyes can see. Every door opens onto a truth that the visible and invisible are woven together, and that human beings are never abandoned in their search for meaning. To reflect on these doors is to realize that African spirituality is not a relic of the past, but a living science of being. It offers technologies of alignment, methods of communication, and philosophies of balance that remain relevant today. In an age where many feel cut off from spirit, disconnected from ancestry, and alienated from the rhythms of nature, the 9 doors invite us to reclaim forgotten pathways. They urge us to listen to our dreams, to respect the body as a vessel of spirit, to honor sacred spaces, and to treat truth as the greatest weapon of all. This is not nostalgia but survival. The ancestors did not leave the doors behind as curiosities for scholars. They left them as inheritances, knowing that each generation would need them anew. To enter these doors today is to step into a deeper sense of belonging, to rediscover a world where the cosmos is alive and speaking, and to remember that we are never without guides. The 9 doors are proof that Africa's wisdom is not broken but waiting, ready to meet those who approach with reverence and courage. If this opened one of your doors, share your thoughts in the comments. Like this video if you believe ancestral wisdom still carries light for the present and the future. And above all, subscribe to History Store for more journeys into the wisdom of Africa's ancestors, where spirit and history meet, and where every story is a door waiting to be opened.